Hey everybody, Michael Libby here again. I'm here with Farrah Garland. I believe I'm pronouncing that properly.
You are?
Um, and this is week 7 of 8. And I am I gotta focus. If you need CEUs for the CRC, I will put our email in chat. You can send us an email off. They are free for these events. Um, I, yeah. I'm gonna let Farrah introduce themselves and go from there.
All right. Um, Hi, good afternoon. My name is, as Michael said, Farrah Garland. I am a queer and non-binary disabled person, which is why I am the one presenting this specific talk to you today. I am an ambulatory wheelchair user who also uses a cane or crutches when I'm going short distances. I can even walk unassisted for very short times, though it's not the best idea. It's pretty painful, and not to brag, but I have a lot of hospital fall risk bracelets, quite the collection. I have a somewhat rare connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and a whole bunch of other annoying chronic nonsense that apparently I am just collecting Pokemon style. Gotta catch them all. I'm also an academic, an artist, a writer, a speaker, and I spend most of my time doing disability activism and queer liberation work, and I love it. I sit on the Connecticut State Independent Living Council, where I work with other disabled folk and allies to support the independent living centers across the state and ensure that disabled folk are being provided the resources they need to be able to live their best lives independently. I do some local politics, which is just as exhausting as it sounds, and I speak at places like this with cool people like you. Also speak for some really cool companies who want people to come in and talk about disability and intersectionality with their employees. I've also had the really wonderful pleasure of working with architects, designers, zoning and planning officials to ensure that new and retrofitted buildings in our area and beyond are accessible. All of this work started by just yelling about accessibility issues and doing grassroots education online via social media and blog posts, which I still do, and I absolutely love. I also do want to note that I will be using identity first or disability first language throughout this talk, as that is my preference as a disabled person. And it is the most empowering and humanizing language from where I sit, and from where the majority of the disabled community sits. So disabled person, not person with disabilities. You know, disabled person, queer person, white person, cat person, you know. I am also reading from notes because otherwise, as someone who also has just rampant ADHD, I will be all over the map, and I want you to be able to have some idea of what we're talking about today. So anyway, I will be stopping periodically to leave room for some questions, which you can type in the chat box and Michael will share with us, or with, yeah, I guess us, me and the rest of y'all. And I've also built in some time at the end of the talk for questions. So if you don't ask them at the little breaks, like all is not lost, it's okay, all is never lost. But at this point in time, does anyone have any questions about identity first language, anything about my work experience, about the topic at hand, anything like that before I jump in? I know it takes a little longer because, you know, the typing. All right, I'm going to assume that's a no, and I'll stop if a question pops up. So I suppose that we have to start by talking about disability. Oh no. What defines disability? Who is disabled? Why does it even matter? The silliest question. First of all, the dictionary definition of disability is, quote, a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movement, senses, or activities. Pretty cut and dry. But there are actually a few models of disability that give us different ways of looking at and defining it, which I think are actually like way more useful than the dictionary definition. The first one is called the medical model of disability. And that's basically the dictionary definition, which is our meat cages disable us, whether that's your body or your brain, which is also part of your body, right? I don't know why people try to separate it, kind of like they try to separate dental care out of healthcare. It's all your body, but our bodies disable us. Something about your physical being limits our ability to engage with the world around us in the same way as abled people. Medical model of disability. Pretty cut and dry. The second is called the social model of disability. This means that, or rather, this states that an inaccessible and ableist society is actually what is disabling and not our bodies. An example of this would be when I'm out and about and using my wheelchair, just wheeling around, popping wheelies, doing my thing. I am perfectly able to get around until I run into things like stairs, poorly designed interior design, or laid out interior design, I should say, so that my words aren't too repetitive. Sidewalks that aren't maintained or are blocked by trash cans and people parked there and whatever. Stuff like that. I'm able to engage with society just fine until I encounter aspects of society that disable me. So that's an example of the social model of disability. So just a different way of looking at like what disability is, right? There's also an integrative model of disability, which just sort of blends the two, the medical and the social. Just kind of like, not quite a 50-50, but something like that, saying, yeah, societal issues, physical issues. It's a pretty popular view for people who deal with chronic pain and some people who have mental health disorders and, things like that. Yeah, just a different way of looking at it. There's also a perspective called compulsory able-bodiedness. And we're going to touch on that later in this talk. It's not really a model per se. It's like not one of the official models of disability, but it does tie in, and it's important that we talk about it as part of this conversation. So I wanted to mention it up front. So as of 2023, so this year, I actually have up-to-date data and I'm very excited about it. The CDC says that 27% of the population of the United States has some sort of disability. That's a lot. We are, and we have been for quite a long time now, the largest minority in the country. I believe we're actually the largest minority in the world, but I didn't double check my data on that, so don't quote me. When we are talking about disability rights issues, people often like to talk about how like anyone could become disabled at any time, to try to talk folks into caring about us. But the fact of the matter is that like 61 million people are already disabled. And if that's not enough to make people care, I don't really know what to say, right? But also, even if it was like 1 in 1,000 people are disabled versus 1 in 4, or a little more than 1 in 4, 27%. When we're talking about civil rights, when we're talking about human rights, talking about treating people like whole people, it shouldn't matter that it could happen to you. it shouldn't matter how large or small of a demographic we're talking about. One person is more than enough to matter. But again, it's not one person. It's 61 million people. It's 27% of the population. That's absurd. So that is what disability is, who is disabled, like everyone, well, okay, a quarter of people, and why it matters, because civil rights, human rights, because people and kindness, and it could happen to you, and it has happened and does happen to so many of us. So I tried to keep this section brief because I know that I'm like the 7th or 8th person here to talk to you about disability, and you don't necessarily need an entire diatribe on what disability is and why it matters. Hopefully you figure that out by this point. But does anyone have any questions about disability? Oh my God, what a loaded question. Any questions about disability at this point? All right. Unless a question pops up. Ooh. Okay. No, it's from Michael. Okay. I'm going to move on. We're going to talk about disability as an identity and as a community. How am I doing on time? Oh man, I'm doing good. I'm proud of me. Sometimes I get rambly, so I get excited about this stuff, you know? All right. Something that we, as disabled people, hear on an abysmally regular basis is, don't let your disability define you. But the truth of the matter is, disability is a defining part of our lives. Only defining thing about us, but depending on the disability, it sure can impact pretty much every aspect of life. Speaking for myself, I cannot think of one area of my life that is not touched by disability. I truly cannot. Interestingly enough, this is very similar to what we hear as queer folk. You know, I don't care what you do, just keep it in the bedroom. Sleep with whoever you want, just don't tell my children about it. You know, stop shoving your agenda down my throat. You know, it's being gay, your whole identity, so on and so on. It's like, ma'am, just trying to like have coffee with my girlfriend and not lose all my civil rights. Like, but we'll get back to this. Let's talk more about disability right now. It's a long, difficult, beautiful process of unwinding internalized ableism and coming to love yourself as a disabled human, not despite being disabled. Oh, excuse me. I think that I read this incorrectly. It is a long, beautiful process of unwinding internalized ableism and coming to love yourself as a disabled human, not despite being disabled. I read it correctly. My emphasis was wrong. It's important. Learning to appreciate the ways in which you are different and how that can make you stronger, give you advantage, a unique perspective, in addition to the ways that it makes life harder. Because trust me, I'm not here to tell you that disability is all good and, you know, rainbows and sunshine and never gonna have any downsides. For me, I live with intense chronic pain, joints that won't stay in place, blood pressure that skyrockets and then plummets. I've got brain fog that's thick like fisherman's chowder and fatigue that lays me out flat after doing nearly nothing. It's not great. But at the same time, learning to navigate a world like this, having to fight to be taken seriously by doctors, to get the mobility aids and medications that I need, for disability income and healthcare. Oh my God, it's a whole lecture right there. For access. It has given me a resiliency that is unbeatable. I've become stronger than I could have imagined, not literally, but metaphorically stronger, and flexible and deeply empathetic. I've learned to advocate for myself and for others, and how to take a metaphorical stand, no matter how gigantic the opponent is, if I feel that I'm on the right side. I truly don't know that I'd be the person that I am if I weren't disabled. In fact, I know I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I weren't disabled. Does my disability define me? Hell yeah, it does. Not entirely, but yes, it sure does. And that's beautiful. Part of disability as an identity is also pushing back against the negative societal stigmas that have been in place since forever. The idea that we are handicapped or cripples, pardon the slurs, socially and biologically less than and undesirable. Embracing disability as something beautiful, or at least not repulsive, is an act of revolution. It's an act of rebellion. It's long been the case that disability has been viewed as something of a monolith. And by that, I mean, not only do people often think that disability presents in one or two ways, but also that the disabled community is a homogenous group. And that could just not be further from the truth. I mean, we don't even agree on identity, or we don't all agree on identity first language, at least. It's the majority opinion, but you know, we are so diverse, from wheelchair users to deaf and blind folks to people with cognitive and developmental disabilities. But you can break it down even further. We've got full-time wheelchair users, ambulatory users, I mean, manual chairs, power chairs, and so on. We are so unique human beings with different interests, preferences, goals, needs, desires, identities. It's like we're individual people or something. Disability, due to societal limitations such as lack of access, lack of understanding, and external and internalized ableism, in addition to medical limitations, can be really isolating. A support system of non-disabled friends, family, loved ones is magnificent and important. But it will never be the same as people who understand you and your experience, at least to some extent, firsthand. This is when the role of the disabled community is vital. While we are not a monolith, as we just discussed, and we have a wide array of lived experiences, necessarily, at least some of those are shared, even if it's just experiencing ableism, even if it's just dealing with healthcare providers as someone with a disabled body or mind, even if it is just being exhausted by people with seemingly good intentions, suggesting 100 cures that they found on the first page of Google. Community with people with shared experiences, overlapping diagnoses, similar hurdles and joys can be a true gift, a place to feel less alone and have your heart mended a bit by people who validate your experiences, by people who don't see you first as a disability or a wheelchair or a heart monitor or as deaf, but as a person. But additionally, it can be a wealth of resources. And it doesn't have to be a physical in-person community, though that certainly has its benefits. The disability Twitter community, which is now slowly finding new homes across various other platforms, has been an incredible boon to disabled people worldwide. We have been able to connect, learn more about how to self-advocate, how to push back against ableism, get support when we've received hate and ableism, hear what medications and treatments are working for others, and learn about other disabilities as well. Community brings us together, and diversity makes us stronger. The diversity bit is vital within community. Academics have noted that the concept of self is harmed by internalized ableism and the very real challenges that we face, and can deeply impact our personal development regarding employment, education, socialization, and more. Since we live in a capitalistic society, and I promise I am not going to go off entirely on that rant, yet another lecture in and of itself, we are taught from a very young age that our value lies in what we can do and what we can produce. And when that is limited, it can warp how we view and value ourselves, especially when we contrast that with others. On one hand, this is why a community of disabled people is so important. Seeing others like you both succeeding and resting, learning to better understand and accept the ever-fluctuating spectrum of health and disability. On the other hand, it is important in literally any community, disabled included, to encourage and foster, and to be mindful of yourself, that individual self-identity. Letting people figure out who they are as unique people with unique needs, even if they are similar to others. Not allowing the suffering Olympics, being mindful that no condition always presents the same, ensuring that there is diversity always. For example, I'm a person with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS for short. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, as I mentioned above. I'm on disability because I cannot consistently work because of my pain, fatigue, brain fog, the unreliability of my symptoms, my medical inability to lift more than 5 pounds, my use of mobility aids at all times, and so on. Even so, I do a lot of freelancing on my own schedule, on my own time. And I do this with people who understand these things, who work with me. I write. I talk about disability rights all the time. I make art when my body lets me. I do academic work when my brain lets me. Some people with EDS are full-time wheelchair users, and they can't do nearly as much as me. Many others don't use any mobility aids and work part or full-time. None of us are any more or less legitimately disabled than any other. We all just have different experiences with the same condition, overlapping conditions, comorbidities, and so on. Disability is vast. But beyond this, are people with other identities. Because as we established, while disability does in fact define us, it's not the only thing. We are also people of color. I'm not me, I have no color, but some disabled people are people of color. People from various religious and ethnic backgrounds. And yes, the reason that you are here, queer folk. Statistically, quite a few disabled people are queer folk, actually. And by quite a few, what I mean is that more than 1/3 of LGBTQ adults and over half of trans adults identify as disabled. Say that again. More than 1/3 of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer adults, and over half of trans adults identify as disabled. That doesn't even count the ones who are disabled and don't identify as such. Cognitive disabilities are the most common, which means, quote, difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. Who can't relate? Kidding, but not kidding. This was followed by disabilities involving independent living and mobility. This, by the way, is in comparison to 27% of the general population, which identifies as disabled. The way these identities overlap is, overlap and intersect is fascinating. And we are going to delve further into that. But before I move on to discussing this intersection of disability and sexuality, does anyone have any questions about disability as identity and community? And while questions come in, I'm gonna drink coffee. All right. Ooh, let's see here. What have I got in the chat? How do people address and challenge internalized ableism and address or confront others who are ableist? Oh man, thanks for starting me off with a softball question. All right. Internalized ableism is tough. It's all tough. All aspects of ableism are tough because it's like so ingrained in our society, like really kind of just baseline, you know, which we're also going to touch on and talk about later. Internalized ableism is really hard because much like all sorts of internalized isms, the first step is acknowledging that like you have it. And that's a tough step, right? For me, I mean, also all of us have internalized ableism. We all start there because that's where our society starts us. We may not all start at the same level of it, but we're all basically born into a society that will ingrain ableism into us. So when I was going through the process of unwinding my internalized ableism, which by the way, is an ongoing thing where if anyone tells you that they've arrived, they're trying to take your money or something. Anyway, I spent a lot of time on disability Twitter back before it was the hellscape that it is now, listening to and talking to people who were a lot further along in their journey than I was. I spent a lot of time delving into concepts like disabled joy and disabled and cute and stuff like that. Observing other disabled people being delighted in their lives as disabled humans, showing off their mobility aids proudly, you know, talking about their lives as disabled people without being ashamed of it. I started doing reading. I started learning about disability. And the more that I started learning about ableism broad brush, so that I could yell at ableist people on Twitter, the more I started realizing that like some of the things that I was like eager to yell at other people about, I was just like, oh, I might also have a little bit of that in myself, right? So it was just like a slow process of learning, observing, paying attention, focusing on the good, the joy, coming to things like this, and which I know is not the most helpful answer, just being like, it's a slow process, it's work, but it is. Listening to disabled people and disabled people who acknowledge that internalized ableism exists and who also acknowledge that disabled joy exists were really big for me. As far as how to address or confront others who are ableist, well, I mean, you can yell at them on Twitter, which I find very cathartic, but it may not be the most effective way to address people. I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the type of ableism. Directly is the best way, I think. Depending on how egregious the ableism is, can sort of inform how firm or gentle or whatever you want to, be with your conversation, but directly. The same way you would address people who are being racist or homophobic. Just like, hey, this is actually ableist. This is not okay. Actually, that joke is harmful. Actually, not having access or going out of your way to deny access is harmful. That's ableist. What have you. You don't have to be rude about it, but yeah, directly. That'd be my answer, I guess. You're welcome. As you see, I do tend to ramble, which is why I wrote stuff down. But yes, you're very welcome. I hope that was helpful. All right. We're going to move on to talking about the intersection. And if anyone else has questions about the last thing, send them on. I'll answer them in the next ad break. All right, the intersection. Whether the disability is physical or cognitive, it does not change a person's sexuality or their need to express it or their desire to express it. Depending on the disability, it may affect the ways in which you are able to express your gender, sexuality, or intimacy, but it doesn't change your sexuality, gender identity, or sexual orientation. I assume everyone is clear on the difference between those three things. Just quickly, like, sexuality is the ability to have sexual feelings, thoughts, attractions, and or behaviors towards other people. Sexual orientation is can also fall under that umbrella term. Gender identity is a person's innate sense of their gender. This is chiefly used in contexts where it's in contrast with the sex assigned and registered to the person at birth, but technically it's true of everybody. You just don't usually refer to a cisgender person as their gender identity, but technically true. And then sexual orientation is a person's identity in relationship to the genders that they are sexually attracted to or romantically attracted to, but for my A spades out there. Anyway, So yeah, moving on. Neither sexuality nor disability can be separated from other aspects of life. This is a very important sentence. This might be the most important sentence in my entire talk, so I'm going to say it again. Neither sexuality nor disability can be separated from other aspects of life, period. This may sound a bit extreme, especially when you consider sexuality. I mean, obviously disability can't really be separated. We've kind of established that, but sexuality? Absolutely. Let's look at the recent Supreme Court 303 creative decision, which allows people to discriminate against LGBTQ folk. That's me. No matter what I'm doing, I am always queer, always non-binary. It's like a program running in the background, right? Like no matter what else I'm doing, that's just like always a fact. Even if I'm not discussing it, if I'm not walking around hand in hand with a gorgeous babe, if I'm not wearing a pin that says, hi, my pronouns are they, them. If I want to get someone to do some like graphic design, like whatever, deny me service because I'm queer. Oh, sorry, my internet skipped out for a second. Everything good? Okay, cool. We're gonna go back real quick. If I want to get a haircut or hire someone to do some graphic design for me or what have you, there is a risk that a business owner can just deny me service just because I'm queer. And it's legal. Because even when you step outside of the areas that you think of as being in the realm of sexuality, nothing is separate. It is part of who you are as a person. We can't dice up our being into little pieces and then pack them away into Tupperware, only to pull them out when it is convenient. That is not how humans work. And speaking of, and speaking of not being able to dice things up and separate them out, let's circle back and talk a little about the fascinating ways that disability, sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender identity all overlap, and how sexuality relates to disability rights work, shall we? In the past 30 years or so, we've come quite a long way in regards to disability rights here in the US. I mean, not far enough, but we've come a way. A way, 2 words. We passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, in 1990, which was within my lifetime, but you know, we did it, we got there. And the ADA Amendments Act in 2008. These pieces of anti-discrimination legislation, fun to say, help provide equality for disabled people in areas like access in public spaces, employment, transportation, and education, and some others. However, while sexual and reproductive rights haven't been center in many human rights campaigns, in the disability rights movement, it's been entirely missing. This, in part, is because disabled people are broadly viewed as asexual. While ace-disabled people exist and are super valid, love to all my disabled ace babes out there, this is far from an accurate generalization, and it is unkind and unfair to everyone, including actual ACE disabled people. But discussing disability and sex is considered at best a touchy topic, generally considered taboo, and at an extreme is just fetishized. Disabled people are viewed and discussed by society and in the media in an infantilizing and sexless way, which surely stems from the ableist roots of viewing us as broken, low-key or high-key, undesirable, or even repulsive. This leads not only to an atmosphere where it feels bizarre to have conversations about disabled people being queer and desiring access to queer spaces, which are notoriously inaccessible, but also puts us in quite a bit of danger. Allow me to elaborate. People means many damaging things, such as lack of access to adequate reproductive care, intrusive and rude questions from strangers, lack of marriage equality, limited access to LGBTQ inclusive services, difficulty finding a partner, and so on. This doesn't even touch on sterilization, which would be an entirely different lecture in and of itself. Hit me up, St. Cloud U. Let's talk sterilization and eugenics. I have heard, I'm going to get a bit emotional here and I apologize in advance. I have heard so many stories of pregnant wheelchair users who have had total strangers walk up to them and ask, "How did you get pregnant?" Their answer is usually, "I had sex with my husband." The shock. I've known blind people who've had folks make really awful like bait and switch or rape jokes as like pickup lines. Many disabled people get asked as an opening line, "Can you have sex?" Been there. It's not cute. Several years ago now, I was dating a fellow who I cared about a lot. And one evening he told me, someday I might want to have kids. And who knows? Maybe you can't have them. So I think I'm gonna go look for someone else now. These kinds of behaviors don't even touch on abled people's ideas of basic, traditional sex being the only way to have sex. Disabled and queer folk are some of the most exciting and creative people I've ever known. And whatever their limitations, they found dynamic ways to find pleasure, delight, joy, and intimacy in their life and with their partners. If only people are willing to view us as more than living Ken dolls. Okay, I'm about to circle back to why the disabled and queer communities overlap so much and what inclusion looks like. But before I do, I'm going to drink some coffee. And do you have any questions about the intersection of disability and sexuality? No questions. I explained it all perfectly. That's spectacular. I knew I was amazing. All right. Okay. So we have covered, and I know I talk with my hands a lot. It's The neurodivergent thing. Sorry, it's the neurodivergent bisexual thing. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate you hanging with me. We're coming to the final chunk that like ties it all together. We're going to talk about heterosexual and abled identities versus queer and disabled identities. Dun, dun, dun. And what inclusion would actually look like and what that would mean. We're going to start by talking about the compulsory able-bodiedness model that we discussed way back at the beginning, like 45 minutes ago. This is a model or theory that was proposed by Robert McRuer in his book, Crip Theory, Cultural Signs of Queerness and Disability. This theory parallels a famous essay by Adrienne Rich called Compulsory Heterosexuality and Lesbian Existence, which is a great essay. This essay looks at how the ongoing oppression and, oh no, dripped coffee on my pages, now they're sticking together. This essay looks at how the ongoing oppression and discrimination against queerness has allowed heterosexuality to be internalized as normal. What's good? It's right. And in a vicious cycle, this normalization of only heterosexual relationships further supports the oppression of queer relationships. The only way to push back against it is to normalize non-heterosexual relationships. I mean, not to the exclusion, of course, of heterosexual relationships, but in addition to them. The system is called compulsory because it identifies that in our current structure of heteronormativity and queer subjection, if you want to be non-deviant, if you want to be normal, to be safe, you have to be straight. Or at least straight, you have to be straight. It is pretending that there is a choice when there is none. Because I think we all know by now that your sexuality or sexual orientation is not a choice, right? The best that some of us can do is present as heteronormative. But why should we have to do that? Why should we have to pretend to be something that we are not, just so that we can exist safely and equally in society? This extends to disability as well, with compulsory able-bodiedness. I'm sure you can see where this is going, the parallels. Robert McRuer says that our society puts a perfectly able body on a pedestal, and nothing less will do. People aspire to the perfect body above pretty much anything else. We fat shame people. We try to fix disabled strangers and not strangers. We spend hours in the gym trying to make our already abled bodies even more abled. This is what is good, what is right, what is normal, which, if we look back at the previous example, what does that mean for bodies that aren't like that? That they are wrong, that they are deviant, that they are bad, shameful, and in need of changing at all costs. Robert also points out that much like heterosexuality, people typically ignore that both queerness and impairments, if you will, absolutely are normal parts of nature and always have been. They exist everywhere. And they aren't something that just get like bred out. If that were so, we wouldn't see them anymore. Quite the opposite. In fact, we see over and over and over again that these things bring strength and diversity to communities that flourish. Queer disabled people sit at the intersection of two marginalized groups and are often invisible in both of them. As disabled people, our queer identities are often forgotten or never seen in the first place. And as queer folk, our disabilities are either glossed over, ignored, or we just can't get into the spaces in the first place. But the experience of learning to embrace not one, but two minorities, of dealing with a world that thinks that you're all wrong and probably shouldn't exist, who tells you to your face that they would just kill themselves if they were you, that you're going to burn in hell, but you keep on keeping on. Someone like that's got a lot to give. So how can we make things better? How can we be more inclusive? What are some action items? Some personal individual steps that we can take on like just a you and me basis is not making assumptions about folks, right? Don't assume what people can and can't do, who people are. Being mindful of your language, both ableist and, sexist and homophobic and transphobic, things like that, generally don't be crummy. Seeking out accessible venues, always, and letting people know why you're doing it. Like, be a good ally. Ask respectful questions, but don't be nosy. Educate yourself. There are so many disabled folk out there doing education work. I do education work. There are tons of folk out there doing it. Same for queer folk. There's resources aplenty. Go, learn, unwind that internalized stuff. There's so much out there and it's beautiful. Make an effort with people's pronouns. You can do it, I promise, and it really matters. Stick up for these communities every chance you get. And there are chances. Show that you care about these communities in like tangible ways, big and small. Small ones matter the most. If you're part of a committee that's doing something for a group like ours, but you look around and notice that there's no one from our community on your committee, first of all, be very suspicious. And second of all, go and talk to someone from the community you're trying to help. Make sure that you're actually doing good, not just wasting time, because we know what we need. And always include a member of the community in things that impact them. These are ways to actually be inclusive that are tangible and not just fancy talkings. On a larger structural scale, like things that are beyond interpersonal things, making spaces accessible, oh my Lord, please. Ensuring that laws like the ADA are actually followed and not just like technically in existence would be great. We can all, queer, cis, het, disabled, abled, fight for the advancement of LGBTQ and disabled rights and legal equality always. There are so many just absolutely horrible queer laws going around right now. And there is always something terrible going around regarding disability rights. I mean, they're always trying to repeal the ADA. Anyway, there's always something. Call your reps, talk to someone. And if you don't know what's going on, follow disabled people, follow queer activists, there's, you know, there's always something you can do, or that our legislators can do. We can make sure that our queer spaces are accessible and that disabled people are explicitly included there and not just like technically welcome. Technically welcome is not really worth very much when we've been excluded, when we've been explicitly excluded for so long. And then the last thing we can do is reduce policing, as policing specifically harms both the disabled and the queer communities at just ridiculously high percentages. These are things that we can do to help these communities, to be more inclusive of these communities. If you would like to know more about any of these points, you can absolutely ask questions. You can hit me up after, you can stay after and talk to me, send me angry emails, whatever's clever. I would be more than happy to chat with you. That's what I've got for today. What questions do you have for me about literally any of this or anything else?
I genuinely loved your presentation. I was laughing the whole time.
Good.
I can't remember where we found you. I believe it was upcoming queer disabled activists in the United States. There was a couple of web podcastings put out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I really like the energy you put out.
Yeah, I feel like these are heavy topics, and there's no reason that like, oh, thank you, Kelly. There's no reason that like it has to be, I mean, I don't want to say it doesn't have to be a bummer, because like it is it is a bummer, but like can like, you know, have good vibes about it while we talk about really heavy stuff. So,
Yep.
you know.
No, we see I work at a thing called Safe Full Time, and evenings and weekends I do mental health counseling or therapy with a lot of queer folks. So we see that, you know, the disability, everything else at play.
Yeah.
And everything else going on in the world. And I love how the DSM tells us that PTSD can only happen in person unless you're a police officer and it's reviewing footage of stuff as a part of your job. Well, when it's a part of your identity, how's that any different?
Well, you know, cops have it real hard. They're
Yeah.
special.
Yeah. Yeah. I, yeah. I could go off on that. I'm gonna be nice.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Yeah. But if anybody has any questions, Farrah's here to answer them. Or
That's right. Yep. Oh, if there are no questions, or if there are none at this very moment, if it is okay, I'll do a little like shameless self-promotion.
go
You
for
can
it. I'm
find
gonna
me on the interwebs. I have Instagram and Facebook and websites and all that stuff. On Instagram, which is where I do a lot of my like education work, it's just my first name _ last name, Farrah _ Garland. I do lots of disability education work. This month is Disability Pride Month. And I've been doing a post every day talking about disability pride, doing disability education, all sorts of stuff. I also talk about my like just endless, you know, health care, medical adventures, and, you know, personal stuff and whatever. You know, it's a whole mishmash. But if you would like to follow me there, learn stuff, you can DM me, ask me about this talk or anything else. I can send you a copy of the talk. I can send you links, literally anything. Please feel free to hit me up. I also have a website, which is just my name, farrahgarland.com. Lots of resources there as well. So, in fact, you know what? I will put it in the chat. Can I do that? Yes, I can. Boop. There you go. If anyone wants or needs anything, you can reach me there. yeah, otherwise, it has been such an absolute joy to be here today and talk about such a like incredible, fun, delightful, heavy topic. Y'all have been just like utterly fantastic. Quiet, but fantastic. Thank you for having me. And Michael, thank you so much for orchestrating this and for having me back. It's just been such a joy. Well, oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. That delights me. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, this was a fun one to put together. It's interesting, like sitting at the intersection of these identities, right? And then like existing there is interesting enough. But then looking at it like academically and trying to like talk about it academically is like a whole different thing. And looking at like, well, why is there this overlap between like queer and disabled communities? And you know, just the whole, you know, like what is it about this that's like worth talking about, and why is this important? And yeah, it's fascinating. My partner had actually asked me earlier today, he's like, why are there so many queer disabled people? Why is that? Which is a fantastic question that I actually really wanted to get into here. It was just like, it's even written down so I don't ramble. This is getting long. But like I think, and from the research I've done and from my own experience, I think that once you already sit in one of these identities, right, where you are the not normal, the deviant, and you've had to come to terms with being the other, what then when you have a second marginalized identity, it's just a lot easier to embrace that, right? So if you're yes, exactly right, because like, yeah, you've already overcome that like barrier of having to like deal with that otherism, like you said, like you've dealt with the weirdness and the uncomfortableness and that first hurdle of, oh my gosh, like I'm the other, I'm the different one, I'm the black sheep or whatever, right? So the second time around, it's just like, yeah, this again. So yeah, absolutely. It just makes it easier to just lean into it. So yeah, I definitely think that that's why. And it's just been just a really interesting thing to look at and to embrace and to talk about. It's something that we don't talk about very often. And I think that talking about disability and sexuality is really important. So yeah, I'm just really excited that that Michael asked me to do this. And I'll talk about this anytime.
I'm
Thank you,
glad you
Lauren. I
joined us.
appreciate it.
Sorry, I was waiting in lunch and they just got here.
No worries.
But no, thank you immensely. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay.